Good morning, everyone. Thank you again for joining me if you've done more than one already, and thank you if it's your first time as well. For those who don't know me and have just joined the group so far, my name is Tom. I am doing a session today on mindfulness. I'm a qualified mindfulness teacher, and I've got my own mindfulness and wellbeing business based in Winchester in Hampshire, and now online thanks to what's going on with everything at the moment. One quick safety message I keep putting into the group, but it is really important, is that these are general mindfulness sessions for increasing resilience, mental well-being, relaxation, etc. Beth, hello, thank you for joining. They're not to replace medical advice from a GP, for example. So anyone who's got any concerns about mental health, etc., please do still go to your GP for things along those lines. But apart from that, let's get started. The first thing I'm going to do is just a quick sort of mental check-in. And if I ask questions, please do also put comments in. It's really lovely on this end of the camera to have those comments. I'm so used to teaching and group workshops and things like that, where the bit I get the most joy from is that interaction with real life people, which of course on this medium I don't get. So if I ask questions, there's no need to comment, but if you would like to, I would love it. Morning Sarah, thank you for joining us. So the first bit is that check-in. Basically, how are you doing today? How has your week been? How are you adapting to, I imagine, a very different Easter weekend than we would normally be expecting? And the same way we do with friends, we will phone or text at the moment, say, how are you doing, how's it going? But we don't often do it to ourselves. So just take a moment to do that and see how you are doing at the moment. Okay, any comments on that? Much appreciated. For those who have watched before, you'll know that I started the last two with something called the 3-minute breathing space. Morning, Kim. And I'm going to do a slightly shorter version of that, still using our breath as a grounding technique. So this is a very short one called the anchor breath. Anchors being something which obviously ground or keep the boat or the ship tied to one place. So even if we've got stormy weather and waves going on around us, like we have in real life around us at the moment, it keeps us still and grounded. So the anchor breath is a quick technique to bring ourselves back to the here and now. So for doing this, again, join in if you want to, that would be great. Just take one hand and put it either on your chest or your stomach, wherever you feel you breathe into the most at the moment. And just stay there for a bit to see what you notice as you breathe in and out for the next few breaths. And now let your hand just drop away. Let's just sit here for a little bit longer, just simply feeling that breath going in and out of the bodies. And whatever thoughts, emotions, sensations come to mind, just acknowledge them without judging them. Try not to get too caught up in them, and just bring attention back to the breathing each time. So next few breaths, each time the attention wanders away, just bring it back onto your breathing again. Good. It's a very quick one. I'm doing it a lot at the moment because we are even more than normal trying to predict what's going to happen next, and we don't know. A lot of my clients are predicting what's going to happen in terms of lockdown, for example, and that word itself, lockdowns, being something that I describe as being either a sticky or a hot or a Velcro thought. It is when one phrase or one word just gets lodged and stuck in our heads, or when we hear it, it triggers a whole stream of additional thoughts and emotions and things like that. And that's when our minds go spiraling off into predicting the future or thinking, oh, I wish it was like it was before. And that's when doing something like an anchor breath, just going back into the breathing, to ground yourself, to slow down, and to bring your mind back to the here and now is really, really useful and really important. So that's a quick one that you can use whenever you need to. I mentioned last week that we're going to be looking today at self-compassion and self-kindness. And there are many reasons for that. I think that it is a time when it's probably even more important than usual. Hello, Michael, thank you for joining us. It's also, I think, one of the hardest aspects of mindfulness that there is. A lot of us are very kind and very caring to others, but to ourselves, possibly not. And some of us, and I include myself in this, will find this element particularly hard, almost an inbuilt barrier to doing this. I still cringe occasionally at some of the wording that we use in mindfulness and meditation for self-compassion and for self-kindness meditations. It feels a little bit fluffy to me, and for those who know me, I'm not a massively fluffy person in that respect. But by practicing it for the last 2 years, I've really seen benefits of it, and that is why I do it. Anyway, thank you very much for your comment. That's really kind of you. Thank you. It is hard to do, isn't it? Definitely. We are seeing, I think, at the moment, so much more kindness toward other people. You've got the NHS clap last night. You've got communities coming together, people who are really supporting each other, and these amazing acts of kindness and compassion to others. But on the flip side, what I'm seeing is people are being increasingly hard on themselves. And that's not unexpected. We are in very challenging situations at the moment, and we are dealing with things that are different from normal. And it's not unexpected, but the compassion is going outwards to people, but it does need to be coming inwards as well to look after ourselves. And I often use the analogy of when you're on a plane, or when we used to be on a plane, and you had the oxygen masks coming down, it would always say to parents, put them on your child first of all. Because if you're, I'm sorry, that's completely wrong, ignore that. To put them on yourself first of all before your child. The instinct is to do your child first, to look after other people first. But it's really important to put them onto yourself first, to look after yourself first of all. Because if you don't look after yourself first of all, and you burn out, then you are unable to help other people. So there's a real barrier to self-compassion and to being kind to yourself. People will often use the phrase, I feel guilty if I do that, but isn't that selfish? Why should I be looking after myself? Other people have more need than me, or I should be looking after my parents because they're elderly or vulnerable, or my children because they're finding things difficult at the moment. Yes, absolutely. Being kind and compassionate is really, really important, but we have to look after ourselves first of all in order to make sure that we can help other people. So to start off today, I want you to think about what you would be like if you had a friend or family member or a loved one who is having problems, and how you would respond. Morning, Helen. Yes, losing track of time myself as well. So how would you respond if somebody you cared about was having a problem of some kind? And I acknowledge that there may well be days when we're not that kind for whatever reasons, especially right now while we've got increased stress. But most of the time I would imagine that a lot of us are very kind and compassionate and caring to people. So just taking a moment and perhaps thinking of a particular example maybe you've done recently where you've shown an act of kindness or compassion to somebody else that you care about. How do you speak to them? What sort of words do you use? What gestures might you use? What is your tone of voice like? Okay, maybe thinking of a recent example and just spotting the little details in there. How do you talk to somebody who is feeling some kind of pain or uncomfort at the moment? And when you have had a chance to think about that, see if you can compare that to how you speak to yourself when you're having a bad day or when you fail at something? I know that my critical voice is currently going on right now, having mixed up my analogy about the oxygen masks. It's very, very, very common to do. If something doesn't go the way that we want it to, the way that we expect it to go, or perhaps in some cases the way that we need it to go, what is our natural instinct? What is the way that you speak to yourself? So see if you can bring to mind a recent example where something has gone wrong. Either you've done something you didn't like the way it worked, or something's happened to you that you felt was unfair, or you failed at something. How do you speak to yourself? What sort of words do you use? Some people use gestures for themselves as well. They can be very unkind sometimes. And what tone, even if it's that inner voice, what tone do you use? And you both absolutely, so kind words and gentle tone to others, but berating of yourself, that is massively common. And just spotting those differences about how we act to others compared to ourselves. We often have this inner dialogue that's going on, and we speak to ourselves in ways that we would not imagine ever speaking to somebody that we cared about at all. And in some cases, even to our worst enemy, we wouldn't speak to them the way that we talk to ourselves sometimes. Even though we know that suffering and pain and failure is a part of life, we all know logically that life isn't going to be perfect, that there's going to be things that go wrong. But when we do fail, and when something goes wrong, our automatic response tends to be something like, why me? Why have I done that? Why has that happened to me? That's unfair. That shouldn't have happened. It wasn't meant to be like this, even though we know that it may well be like that. It's meant to be like that. And absolutely, so Sarah, about being impatient, we are very impatient with ourselves. We have often much more patience for those around us than we do for ourselves. Our level of expectation is a lot higher on ourselves often than it is for others. And I want to mention, it's worth looking up, there is a Buddhist parable about the second arrow. It talks about how when we encounter something that leads to any kind of pain or suffering, or even just being dissatisfied with life, we build up a lot of mental processes around that, which leads to additional suffering. And often that causes even more pain than there was from the initial event. And the parable talks about how our response to being shot by an arrow, that initial event, is often to shoot a second arrow at ourselves. That second arrow is the way that we process those events. Whereas in contrast, if we can take those events and be mindful about them and try to be open and curious and accepting of the fact that life can fail, that we can fail, that life can be difficult, that there is pain and suffering. So rather than shooting ourselves with that second arrow, that thought process of why me, isn't this bad, how awful I feel about it, trying to be open about the fact that we all do suffer sometimes makes a significant difference. But we do tend to, the second arrow basically is us beating ourselves up. Something happens, whether it's our fault or somebody else's, and we will beat ourselves up quite significantly about it. So I've written this, thank you, David. I've written this self-compassion exercise, meditation, whatever you want to call it, based on two of the leading people in this field who I'll mention in the group as well. I did post one of them about 2 weeks ago, I think. So again, with any of these exercises, most of us will be sitting. If you're lying down, that's fine. I'm going to do this as if you are sitting down, because I can't see you. Possibly thankfully for some of you who haven't got out of bed yet, I'm sure. One person did say last week that they were thankful there was no camera interaction because they were watching it from their bed and their hair was an absolute mess. So that's fine, I can't see you. But because of that, I'm going to make the assumption that people are sitting down. But when you do sit down, I said this last time and the time before, people tend to slump back and almost relax too much into a chair. Try to, if it's comfortable, have a straight back, because that physical posture is setting the intention that you're going to be doing something where you're focusing rather than just relaxing, and there's a bit of a difference on there. So making yourself comfortable, and if you're happy to just closing your eyes. And settling into your posture, just again tuning into your body, noticing how that feels, any aspects of comfort or discomfort, perhaps aware of the sensation of the feet touching the floor, of whatever you're sitting on at the moment. Maybe even tuning into if you can feel that weight of your arms and the weight of your head on your neck as well. But whatever the case, just tuning into what you can feel right now, fully inhabiting your body in a way that we don't often do. We're often very unaware of our physical being. And then, because we're learning to control our attention, make that choice now to move your attention to sounds. Those could be sounds inside the room or outside the room. You could be in a very quiet space right now or a very noisy space. Whatever it is, try and tune into sounds for the next few seconds without getting too caught up or judging them. And now choosing to move your focus, your attention, that spotlight of attention, onto your breathing again. That sense of inhaling and exhaling. Being curious about where you can feel that breathing. Where do you feel it most strongly? Is it your nostrils, your chest, your stomach? Just being aware. Just taking a few moments to rest with your breath. Just simply and easily. And I would like you to bring to mind some aspect of your personality or a mistake you've made. It could be a recent failure that's been bothering you lately. Perhaps something that you criticise yourself for, or it's made you feel somehow inadequate. Whatever that is, try and get in touch with your feelings about it. And any emotions that are linked to it. How was it making you feel? Common ones are sadness, fear, a sense of isolation, not good enough, sometimes guilt as well. So whatever the example is, just connecting into what those kind of core emotions are for you. In mindfulness, we talk a lot about how the mind and body are extremely closely linked, and that every mental thought, every emotion tends to have a physical response in the body. So see if you can locate that for you. See if you can see when that sadness or guilt or disappointment is located. For a lot of us, it can be a tightness in the throat. That's where mine tends to be. It can be a feeling of unease in the sort of upper chest. It can be changes in breathing. It can be tension in the shoulders or the neck. That's why the body scan from last time is really important. It helps us tune into those. So if you can do, and don't worry if you can't, but thinking about what emotions you feel with that example of something where you've failed or you feel bad about something, and where those emotions are in your body. Normally we do whatever we can to not feel these. We push them away or we try and distract ourselves. And while that can work sometimes, it can also sometimes either prolong those feelings or make them even stronger after the distraction has ended. So for now, just allow those feelings of discomfort, whether emotional or physical, to be there. right now as they are. Instead of resisting them, allowing them to be there, noticing them, being curious, what am I feeling, where am I feeling it, what emotions are there? And perhaps also noticing or being curious about how much of our suffering is caused by our own self-judgment, by our own fears and expectations of not being quite good enough, of how life should be. Some of our greatest suffering is caused by our own hands, that we should be perfect or that life should be a certain way. So just don't judge yourselves if that's happening, but just be aware if that thought process is starting to be there. And now, either keeping that same problem or failure, whatever it is in mind, maybe changing to a different one. It could be a problem with work or with family, with money, or with anything that causes you a feeling of uneasiness. Try to clearly visualise that situation. And again, tuning into how that feels, to think about how it feels to have this problem in your life right now. Now we're going to go into the first component of self-compassion, which is that mindfulness. Just being aware of you are in this moment right now. That is a problem, accepting that is a problem at the moment. And understanding how it feels to have that, how your body responds to it, how your mind responds to it. Whether you have mental thoughts about this is tough, this is hard, this is unfair, this is stressful, it shouldn't be happening. Whatever it is, just being aware of that is the first step. And by being aware of it and by giving a name to it or noticing it, helps us to place a little bit of distance between us and that feeling of discomfort. And the second element of self-compassion is an insight into our shared humanity, the fact that all of us struggle and that stress is a part of living. And although we know that logically, what we tend to do when something uncomfortable or painful happens is we go, oh, why me? Why is it happening to me? But just remembering that we are all having lives where we struggle and we feel pain and suffering. And stress is a part of living, and quite often that's how it feels to be alive, and that you're not alone in that. And the third and final element of self-compassion is self-kindness. And just remind yourself that any time when you feel pain or suffering is an opportunity for you to show yourself some compassion. So you might say to yourself, may I be able to give myself the strength and the kindness I need to right now to get through this? May I treat myself as I would a good friend right now? And then do it. And if you want to, take this time to perhaps even imagine that you've got a good friend, someone you care about, who is in the exact same situation as the one that you're thinking about right now, who is struggling in the same way as you, and then think about what you would say to that person. If you had just a minute, what would you say? Perhaps something like, I'm here for you, I care about you, I know it's difficult right now, you can do it, I believe in you. Whatever it is, think about what words you'd offer to a friend in that situation, and then see if you can offer yourself the same words, those same phrases, treating yourself in the same way that you would do a good friend who is struggling, and that is self-compassion. It's often harder than we feel it is, and I would imagine for some of you, the idea of being kind to yourself and speaking to yourself in the same way as a good friend can be a challenge at first. But self-compassion is hugely needed in life in general, and right now more than ever. So see if you can do this exercise a few times during the next week. giving yourself a bit of a break, going easier on yourself than you would be normally, a bit less critical of yourself. As we come to an end, just take a couple of deeper breaths than normal. And in your own time, just open your eyes again, if they were closed. Now, as we sort of finish up here, it'd be lovely to get any sort of feedback on how people find that, any barriers that they have to being self-compassionate. It is amazing in any kind of group or workshop or course with mindfulness, the benefits people get from shared insight, from shared understanding. We often will be doing exercise and people will sitting there going, oh, is it just me feeling like this? Is it just me struggling with this? And then they'll hear someone else in the group say something, go, oh, it's not just me. It's not just me who's feeling this. Other people find this hard. Other people struggle with this. And in some cases, it's the knowing our differences which really helps as well, that people struggle with different things, and something which perhaps you find really easy, someone else finds really hard, and vice versa. But that shared connection is really important. So any comments are really appreciated, both during the live video now, but when it's in the group later on, just adding anything in that you think people would find useful. But I'm hoping that is a good start to your weekend. David, you're absolutely right. It's a very hard thing to shut out and focus. And there's I've seen misconceptions in mindfulness and meditation that we should have a blank mind. And my supervisor is a trained Buddhist monk. And he talks about how you have people who are trained in meditation since they're extremely young and they still are unable to shut things out. And it's not about shutting things out so much. It's about being aware and not getting caught up in things. And what we find is the more someone does mindfulness, our attention spans increase. Our ability to notice when our attention is wandering away to something else increases, and we can bring it back much more quickly and more easily. It's why it works for students a lot who are focusing on revision and things like that. Fiona, that's very common. That happens to quite a lot of people. We realise how hard we are on ourselves. That's quite a sad thing, but it's a good thing in terms of we can start being kinder to ourselves as well. And Amy Beth, that's lovely. That and that's again that mental connection to the physical changes. When we feel better, our face can just light up. We can smile. When I do gratitude work with people, you see them actually sort of brightening up. It's really lovely. But we'll end that for now. I hope everyone has a really lovely weekend, wherever you are, whatever you're doing. But if you take one thing away from today, it's try to be as kind to yourself as you are to those that you care about. But thank you very much for joining, everyone, and I will see you next Friday at 10:30 again. I'll put whatever topic it will be up in the group. But have a lovely day, and bye for now.